right. I think we're live. We're doing an episode of Bad Ideas. I got Nick Petros and Chris Cameron, sales and marketing minds uniting and improvising over stuff we have not prepared for at all. So I think the idea behind this, I always thought when I was a wee lad of 6 or 7 years old that business was about folks like sitting around a room and coming up with cool stuff to do. Then I started working and realized that salespeople are the only ones who get to come up with cool stuff to do. Everyone else lives in a spreadsheet. But that fun and dream is still there. And I think over the years, like you, I've gotten to work with a bunch of really smart people who are able to think really creatively on their feet. And I think that's the idea behind this. So the premise of the show that we're going to try to put together is we're going to look at one really bad idea that I have not prepared for and you clearly haven't seen before. They're pulled by an assistant of mine off of Reddit. So these are like ranked really bad business ideas. We'll talk about why they're really bad ideas, and then we'll spend the back half of this meeting talking about how we'd actually turn this in like to a business. So a lot of improvisation. It should be a fun time. And the goal, so we're going to film 10 of these before we make them go public. We're not going to promote them in a very big way, just, organic social channels. I think the goal is if we can get one person to go to badideaspodcast.com and enter one idea that's bad, we'll keep doing an episode about that bad idea until we run out. So it could be indefinite, or we could get like 2.5 viewers and they could be really bored, but let's see how we do. What do you think? You ready, Chris?
I'm ready to go. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. Or embarrassing, or both, which could win. So I have this super awesome bad idea envelope, just like a formal game show. So we'll take a look at what we're working with. Here's our bad idea. You can't read it in reverse. I'll read it out loud. So renting cars on Enterprise and subleasing them on Turo. All right. So Enterprise is a rent-a-car business. You can rent online. I think they're nationwide, right? Coast to coast.
Enterprise is coast to coast. Yeah. They do a lot of business at airports, and they also have smaller local, in-town type shops.
Yeah. So a lot of Enterprise. Turo, I think, is still regional, right? It's only on the East Coast.
I've actually used them out in Colorado. So
all right.
I think they're national at this point. Well, this is going to be a fun one.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really bad. So Turo, I think it's all private ownership, right? So you actually own your car. I think you log on and register. It's kind of like Uber, except you don't have to drive. You give them your vehicle and, someone can effectively rent your private car, right?
Yeah. So kind of quick story. So we actually, we got burned by Avis. Back in the day, we were going on a ski trip. And so I'm sitting in the airport lounge trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do for a car? And we happened upon Turo, and we found this amazing 4-wheel, drive Jeep Wrangler, had a whole kitchen that you could pull out of the back, propane stove, refrigerator. Right. Literally, it was made for like ski trips and like overlanding. And the gentleman who owned the car, met us at the airport, gave us a tutorial on how to use everything. So it was like getting a concierge level service, but at the end of the day, it was his Jeep Wrangler. It needed an oil change. The check engine light was on, but it worked.
Yeah.
And it was an awesome experience.
Good renting experience. So I think I actually did use a Turo. This is like way back in the day, like 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago. I don't know if they're that old. But I remember they were promoting all these luxury cars. Like you could rent a Porsche for $69 a day, which obviously hooked me. And I found a red Camaro convertible. And I was driving across 75 in Florida, so coast to coast from Naples to Miami to meet some friends. And went to pick up the car. The photos were like stock off of the Chevy site. So it looked brand new, and I was super excited. I think it was $129 for a day and a half. And I showed up and the car was not brand new, and the top had been left down overnight in a rainstorm. So like the interior of the car was like muddy. And it was my only ride, and I had to get across. So I wound up like driving for 3.5 hours in a muddy car with the top open.
Soggy seats.
Yeah. Well, so needless to say, quality control is a challenge for them. I'm sure they find a way to do a better job now with a little more funding, but like, yeah, bunch of ways this is a really crappy idea. You don't own the rental car. So like, how do you even register it on Turo, right?
Well, that was my question. Like, first thing that comes to mind is proof of insurance, because Turo is actually backed by Liberty Mutual from an insurance standpoint. So I can't imagine there's any way in heck Liberty Mutual is going to touch a rental car as a subleased rental car.
Yeah, that's right. And plus, we were just talking about quality control a second ago. I mean, you had a good experience, albeit like your car needed a little bit of work. My car needed a lot of work. But imagine you throw rental cars into the mix. You ever get in a rental car and it like won't accelerate and the brakes rattle and there's like, we were in one in DC for a conference one time. There were like boogers on the back seat.
Oh yeah.
It's like, yeah. So like, how do you quality control the car? Yeah, the tires are bald. So just all prone to like liability. You can't actually even register it on the app. I mean, economically too, it's arbitrage opportunity. You have to rent the car for less than you flip it for on Turo. And I'm sure you have some sort of flexibility on Turo, but generally speaking, rental cars go for like premiums well beyond their worth from the rental company. So like, you'd need to rent the car. Well, I guess we're getting into the back end. You need to rent the car for like a higher price at a peak time. So it's justified by the Turo peak rates.
Well, that was what drew us to Turo. Is we were going to Colorado for New Year's, right? It's peak season for skiing. You try to go through Avis or Enterprise or what have you, and the prices are all jacked way up because they know people want 4-wheel drive SUVs to get into the mountains. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you make any money on that? Because the whole draw for Turo is that you can get these, either practical or in your case, exotic, or like in my case, like really utilitarian cars for less than the cost of going through a traditional rental agency. So they're kind of the rental purpose.
Yeah. I mean, you have the rental car, you have the franchise, you have the manufacturer, and then you have Turo all taking a margin out of the deal. So there's really nothing for you to play with.
No, I can't see any way that makes money. And then my mind also goes right to risk, right? God forbid anything happens to that car while the renter has it out or the sub-renter has it out. Now all of a sudden you're on the hook. Like, I mean, I don't know how many people actually buy like enterprise, like insurance.
Yeah. Well, we would.
I guess you'd have to, right? But I mean, I instantly checked no on that box. So, something happens, like, is Turo going to cover that? Is the driver's personal insurance going to cover that? Is Enterprise somehow going to cover that when they find out that you were not the registered driver?
Yeah.
Or the driver that was driving was not registered with Enterprise?
Yeah. Right. Liability this is a really bad idea. There's like no margin in it. The risk is through the roof. There's no quality control. Like legally, it probably can't even bend. There's no way to insure it. This is an ill-advised business opportunity.
Well, I think when you rent a car through Enterprise, you have to actually sign a waiver that says like, I am going to be the only driver of this car. So instantly you're in breach.
From day one, you're in breach. All right. So let's flip this on its head. What if we were going to try to find a way to make this work? Like, where's the opportunity here?
So I'm going to draw from someone else's experience. I wouldn't do it with normal passenger cars. Enterprise does have a giant fleet rental program for like box trucks, vans, that sort of thing. And that's not as transactional. That's very much
you want to rent box trucks on Turo? So you could rent a Porsche or like a moving van?
Well, exactly. I wouldn't necessarily do it for like, I'm going to go on vacation and rent a box truck. But, it's like, if you've got to move something, right? We did say it had to be the exact use case. But I think that could be a much more lucrative opportunity, because when you're talking about fleets, you're also talking about volume. Right. So now you've got some volume incentive. The more trucks that you are renting, the more margin you have the potential to make. I don't know. I'm really struggling to see how I could make that work with residential or passenger vehicles.
Crazy idea time, right? So I also discovered this second degree, but I didn't know that it's actually a big pain in the ass for rental franchise managers to get cars to move from location to location. So if you didn't know this, you can actually rent vehicles from point to point if it's a desired locational shift for like $15 a day, $20 a day, even really nice cars. So there is margin there. So if we could kind of combine the two ideas, so there's that like heavy incentive. The rental car company wants to move their vehicles and there's routes they want to take, but those are known quantities. So like the route is almost the product. The car isn't the product. Mm-hmm. So if you can get a company like Enterprise to surface all the routes that they want their cars to move on and sign like a bulk contract, just like you were saying. So you're renting like a directional fleet of vehicles from them. There's a lot of margin in that. And then you're listing the car route combination on a Turo. Again, you'd have to find a way to convince Liberty Mutual that you're going to be able to vet these people and they were actually going to go the route that you wanted. Mm-hmm. But, it's almost, you're like the customer, the need, the medium. If you steal the Dan Kennedy triangle, I think, the customer is actually the rental company. It's not the Turo buyer. Like we're creating like a paid for fleet of car movers, and shifting their inventory around for them for a marginal profit with a minimal risk attached to it. What do you think?
That is actually really interesting. I think logistically, to be able to serve up, have an algorithm that can serve up, okay, you're trying to drive from Boston to Miami. And, these are the cars that are available during this window based on the known inventories that Enterprise has. I mean, logistically, that sounds like a little bit of a nightmare, but there's smarter people than me that know how to write those sort of things.
Yeah. And I think they just buried like at full rate right now. So you don't know if you're getting a car they wanted to move or not, but you just find a way to surface that. All right. So we've done the nerdy stuff. This is more your expertise than mine. I think, it's not that hard to actually figure out how something could work. The really hard part is getting a lot of people to pay for it. Mm-hmm. So, say you work it out, you get it to a point where you have contracts with Enterprise and Turo knows that one person is renting a whole lot of cars that they don't own, and Liberty Mutual is bought in to actually underwrite the whole process. How do you turn that into a business? Like, are you marketing to Enterprise? Are you selling to them? And like, how do you sell it? How do you get someone to actually take a plunge?
I think it's, you joked earlier, it's like, salespeople get out of the spreadsheets, but I think this is one of those instances where we got to jump back into the spreadsheets, right? It's like, if we can advertise cars that we know need to move to a specific location, and we can actually get people to pay knowing that the car is going to get back to that desired location, there's a tremendous amount of value in that. And to your point earlier, it's like, you've got effectively a totally paid for workforce, right? There's zero cost to you besides the wear and tear on the vehicle. You've got another company that's handling the logistics of finding the driver, vetting the driver, making sure that the timeframes work, right? There's a tremendous amount of value in taking that off of the plate of someone like an Enterprise. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I think that if you had the backing of the insurance companies, right, and if somehow Turo could make it work logistically, I think that would be, I don't want to say a no-brainer, right, because there's always unforeseen risks. But I think that would be a very interesting opportunity for someone like an Enterprise. It takes a whole logistical element off of their plate, and people are effectively paying to do their job. They don't have to put the car on a car carrier, right? They don't have to pay someone from Enterprise to take the road trip now, where they're incurring the cost of gas, room and board for that person, their per diem to take care of their expenses if they have to make that trek, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole lot of logistical nightmare that service like this would actually eliminate from an enterprise or an Avis.
It's a bad idea with really high value. Look at us being nerds. I'm thinking more. I'm actually working on a deal right now that I'm not going to talk about because I'll dig shit. But working on a deal right now that's a lot like this, and I think the problem you run into when you're trying to get people to change the way that the business operates, like people hate to change. I mean, you've experienced it at a couple companies. People are like set in their ways. We have a partner we work with. He even has like a mime. He goes like this, like people just repeating the same systems over and over again because people do, like they get stuck in a rut and that's what they want to do. Even if it's cheaper or like more valuable to move out of that. And I think like that's the bigger dilemma with all this stuff. Like, how do you get someone to see an alternative viewpoint from what they're already locked into? I'm almost wondering if you have to like literally go strap the COO to the top of a car and like drive one of the transition routes so he understands like how much of this actually happens and how they're paying people to do that now. And like turn it into a profit center. Particularly with big companies like enterprise. I mean, you sold into some pretty big companies, right? On the software side. Yeah. How do you get those guys out of their own way, like to see the light of something different?
Persistence. No, but really, no,
you really annoy them.
I will stop calling you when you buy from me. No, really, it comes down to communicating business value, right? And a large part of that up front is asking questions, right? What's important to you? What are the challenges you're facing? What is it costing you? And what does it cost you to keep doing things this way in perpetuity? Right. And that's a scary, scary thought for a lot of people. It's like, when you think about humans, right? And I love this sort of example, but we're motivated by two things, right? We're motivated by fear and we're motivated by greed, right? So we either want to pursue the good or we want to avoid the bad. And it just so happens that we're really good at avoiding the bad. And when it comes to pursuing good or positive outcomes, we're really lazy as a species. The vast majority of people are wired to avoid negative, much more so than they are to pursue the positive. And so when we look at building business cases, especially when we're selling technology, it's not just what do you gain, but what do you avoid? If you make a change today, right, what bad things down the road do you get to avoid? When we're selling sales enablement software, it's like, well, it could be as cut and dry as, what does it cost you for only 50% of your reps to hit quota? But on that, a lot, because salespeople are a huge cost. But then on the other side of that, it's like, hey, what does it mean for you not to have to go into a really uncomfortable board meeting and present for the third quarter in a row why you missed your numbers? Right? There's an emotional response. There's an emotional response attached to that. And it's about finding, I don't know that we've got enough time in a single episode to come up with the marketing messaging for enterprise, but there is some uncomfortable negative situation that can be avoided by effectively outsourcing and getting people to pay to be the outsourcee of getting these point-to-point vehicles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I think this stuff is so hard. And I think that's why, to Peter's analogy, this stuff happens so often because like the cost to change almost subconsciously always looks greater than the value that you get from changing. And like, that's the marketers and the sellers obstacle to kind of overcome. Relevant example right now, we're going through this transition from fossil fuels to like alternative or greener sustainable energy, however you want to define it. And I think like, it's just easy to do the same thing. Like there's gas stations everywhere. It's faster. It's going to, like what's already there is so easy and so convenient. As long as it's not painful, people aren't going to change. They feel like this really bad idea of renting enterprise cars on Turo would present a similar problem, even if it does really solve like a major business pain point. Like they already make it work the way that it is, without taking on the risk of a bunch of yuppies renting their cars and driving them from point to point. So like finding a way to get them to see the value in doing something new, is going to take kind of a mammoth effort. That's what I'm reading a lot about now, like how to frame things the right way, how to stack value. Have you learned anything interesting on that front that you found like works really well?
Yeah, when I think about again, I tend to go to the negative, right? It's
You're the bad guy.
well, it's people don't necessarily buy from people they like. They buy from people they learn from, right? And if you can expose, so what I like to do personally is you go in and you've got a problem, right? And they validate the problem for you. And now it's like, well, how do I make that problem and quantify this problem in a way that is much bigger and scarier than they originally thought it was, right? Because they needed impetus to change. Like you said, it's Newton's third law, right? An object at rest tends to stay at rest, right? So how do we create enough of an impetus for these people to change? And then once you figure out, and that's your big challenge, right? It's getting someone to agree that they need to change. Once you get someone to agree that they need to change, the why change with me conversation is so much easier, right? And that's what marketing departments are really good at, right? It's, well, look at all the cool stuff that we've done. Look at our NASCAR slide with all these logos that we've worked with. Look at the outcomes we've achieved, right? Because once you get someone to agree that their challenge is big and scary and they need to change it now or else, right? And then you throw a bunch of really cool outcomes at them. Right now, it's that emotional, they can validate their emotional decision for overcoming that fear of change. And they can build a business case, usually with the salesperson's help, of what they're going to get out of making that change and justify why the organization should go ahead and move in that direction.
Yeah. And I think one of the tricks software reps use on me that tends to work really well is kind of showing me the new way of doing things and then shutting off the demo. So I have to go back to the old way. So I'm forced to live with like the inefficiency of the past. It makes it really easy for me to want to buy the transition.
Well, interestingly enough, that comes from the auto world. Car salesmen have been using that trick forever. The test drive.
Yeah. Then you have to go back
get
in
in the new car. It's like, oh wow, look at how many cup holders I have. How comfortable the seats are. And then you get back in your 10-year-old Beater with the blown out shocks, and you're like, yeah, I need to buy a new car.
My car's almost 10 years old, but I don't want to get rid of it because it sounds good. The test drive is a major thing. I think that's going to be a theme of a lot of these bad ideas. I mean, I think this is a particularly awful idea, but it definitely led to an interesting conversation about like enterprise and the opportunity to turn something that they might not have thought of into something that could help them. But I think like the big theme of a lot of this, and something I've seen a lot of the companies, or across a lot of the companies that we've supported, is that they have really good ideas. They offer a lot of value and they have a product that solves kind of a unique problem. But the variance between super successful and like doing okay is finding a way to break someone out of that repeated habit, whether it's a customer or a business partner or an investor. That's the biggest challenge. Wondering if maybe that'll be, again, the theme of the show, that it doesn't really matter how bad the idea is. If you can show enough value gap between where you are and where it's going to be with the solution in place, and make that emotionally relevant to the person that you're selling it to, maybe they'll make a move.
I mean, that's kind of the name of the game in sales. So I can see that absolutely being a persistent theme here.
Yeah. Interesting. What other crazy things have you been selling lately? Anything wild is coming to mind?
Well, this might be a little bit of a shameless plug here. I'm doing a little bit of consulting for a company called Fuel to Fly. They're based out of South Africa, and what they do is outsourced, effectively cold emailing at scale. And so there's a bunch of upfront work that they do, but they're actually starting to work with a bunch of really cool brands, all across different industries: food and beverage, clothing, retail, hospitality. really interesting group, and it's a couple of guys, just that decided that there was a better way to do cold outreach versus just paying BDRs, and they're finding a lot of success with it. It's really cool to work with them.
That's awesome. So that's a good idea. And you're using some of the same principles, like helping them find a way to frame the value and put it in front of the right people and help them make magic happen.
That's exactly it. A lot of the stuff that we're doing is actually based around how do we take that messaging and twist it a little bit, right? We've got all these positive things that we like to talk about, and why it's more efficient. You can do so much more with so much less. All these different things. But it's really difficult to get people to change because they're like, well, we have a website, we've got this, we've got that. And it's like, well, so you're happy. You don't want to do more. Like we've got a recession coming down the pipe. You don't want to get in front of more customers and develop an emotional connection with them before people start deciding what they don't want to spend money on anymore. So it's very much the same conversation. It's building that messaging and finding out how to create that emotional connection, not only with what they're doing, but also that really visceral emotional response for, well, this is why I need to change now.
It's interesting. I mean, you bring up recession, what everyone's talking about while we're filming this, but also like all the banks are now suddenly forecasting like a short-term bull run, which is really bizarre. But bringing it back to the emotional activity behind the recession, when you really think about it purely from an emotional and reactive perspective, you have like lots of companies and lots of consumers simultaneously reacting like something bad's going to happen, which is what makes the bad thing happen, which is almost exactly the same thing that we're talking about here. So what gets me really excited is like when people lean in and start to build, like when everyone else is pulling back because they're afraid of this thing that's going to happen, like your needs don't go away. Like you still need to eat, you're still going to travel, you still need to drive, you're still buying fuel, you're still flying. Maybe not the same quantities, but those things are still there. So the markets are still there. I think the guys that lean in and put forward solutions, particularly to have crazy problems like renting massive fleets of cars on a platform that you don't own, there were really cool things happen. I mean, look at Airbnb. It's almost exactly what they did. People were leasing apartments that they did not own and renting it on effectively a Turo for apartments, and massive, amount of small businesses were made that way. Coming out of the last recession, I believe, right? They're almost 10 years old.
Yeah, they're just about.
Yeah. So maybe we'll see some more of that happen, and hopefully some of this methodology gets applied and we can bring it in and talk about it.
Yeah. I think that whole space, like you look at your Airbnbs, your Verbos, your Ubers, Lyfts, I think one of the things, and this is partially generational too, but you look at that desire to do more, to have more than just your one stream of income. I think anywhere where folks can find an opportunity to automate and scale and have that second or third stream of income, I think we'll see some of the effort. And, companies like Uber, like Airbnb, like Turo, they've done a great job of putting the infrastructure in place to do it. But I think the real opportunity is maybe not this exact example, but it's finding ways to
definitely not,
but finding ways to take that existing infrastructure and scale it out. So now you've got, you're not just renting one car, right? Because there's your limitation. If you're a Turo, rentee, I don't know which one it would be. If you're the person who puts your car on Turo, right? Your limitation is how many cars do I have, right? Because only one person can rent your vehicle at a time. So how do you scale that?
Yeah. Hey, you brought on another value point, the income upside. So again, you find the margin from enterprise and you achieve scale on the platform. I think that's the thing interesting. Chris, you're way too smart. You made this bad idea look far less bad than I thought it was going to.
I don't know about that. It's still pretty bad.
It's still pretty bad. We've got a couple more bad ones. Again, we're going to try to do 10 of these. The goal is to see if we can get one person to go to badideaspodcast.com and drop in an idea. And we'll keep filming podcasts for every idea that we get there until people stop putting ideas in there. But hopefully you'll come back and riff with me on a couple more of these guys.
Absolutely. If you'll have me, I'd love to.
Yeah. It's been a ton of fun. All right. Thank you so much. Here we go.